All right, let's jump right in. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Terracotta Army.
Oh, fascinating choice.
I think it'll be fun now. I'm sure many of our listeners are familiar with the basics, thousands of soldier statues buried with China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang.
Right.
But we're going to be uncovering some details that even those who consider themselves pretty knowledgeable might not know.
I think there will be some surprises in store.
Definitely. We'll be drawing from a pretty expensive resource about the Terracotta Army for this one.
Okay.
And honestly, even just reading through it to prep, I found some stuff I was like, whoa, did not know that.
That's great. What was something that surprised you?
Well, like, I knew about the soldiers, obviously, and the horses and chariots buried with them, but I had no idea there were also, like, officials and acrobats and strong men.
And musicians.
Musicians. Wow. Okay, so the emperor wasn't messing around. He wanted to keep the party going in the afterlife.
It really does seem that way, doesn't it?
It's like he was trying to recreate his entire world in this necropolis.
Yeah, and showcase the power and splendor he had during his life. To have all of those figures created to accompany him.
Yeah, speaking of the figures themselves, I mean, they're life-size. The craftsmanship is unbelievable.
It really is.
How do they even make these things?
Well, it's pretty ingenious, actually. They would create these separate molds for the heads, the arms, the legs, the torsos.
Right?
And then they would assemble them and then add individual details like facial features or hairstyles.
So even though there are thousands of these figures, they're not all just identical copies?
No, exactly.
That's fascinating. I also read that they had a pretty sophisticated system of quality control.
They did.
Like there were workshop names inscribed on individual pieces.
Yeah, to help ensure that everything was made to a consistent standard.
So even back then, they had to worry about keeping things up to code, huh?
Sounds like it. It really makes you appreciate the level of organization that went into such a massive project.
For sure. Now, one thing that's always intrigued me is that the emperor's tomb itself is still unopened.
Oh, right. Yes.
It's like this giant mystery.
It is, and there's been a lot of debate amongst archaeologists about whether or not it should be excavated.
Oh, I can imagine.
From what we know, based on ground-penetrating radar, it seems like the tomb has been hermetically sealed, so potentially everything inside has been perfectly preserved for centuries.
Wow. That's incredible. But I guess there's also the risk of damaging everything once it's exposed to the air.
Exactly, and that's a huge concern. I mean, think about the warriors themselves. They were originally painted in these incredibly vibrant colors,
Oh, right.
using pigments made from things like precious stones, fired bones, minerals, but unfortunately a lot of that color has faded over time due to exposure to the elements.
That's too bad. So we're really only seeing a shadow of what they must have originally looked like.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable to think about how brightly colored these figures would have been when they were first created.
And that's just the warriors. We were talking earlier about all the other figures buried there, like the acrobats, so special about them.
Their discovery back in '99 was pretty significant because they display a level of anatomical detail that's really impressive.
Oh, interesting.
And their poses are really dynamic and lifelike, much more so than the soldiers.
Yeah, I've seen pictures, and they definitely have a completely different vibe.
Do they ever? They're really expressive, and it makes you wonder about what their purpose was in the grand scheme of the necropolis.
Like, why were they included alongside the warriors?
Well, some people believe that they represent actual performers from the emperor's court,
Okay.
immortalized in clay, so they could continue to entertain them in the afterlife.
Ah, I see. So even in death, he wanted to have the best entertainment?
I guess you could say that.
You know, there are a lot of really interesting theories about the Terracotta Army. But one that I find particularly fascinating is the idea that they might have been influenced by ancient Greek sculpture.
Oh, right, yeah.
That's a pretty controversial theory.
It is, because some scholars argue that the realism of the figures is very unusual for typical Qin-era art, and they suggest that maybe there was some artistic exchange happening along the Silk Road, that ancient trade route that connected the East and West.
So are they saying that maybe Greek sculptural techniques traveled east and had an influence on Chinese artists?
That's one interpretation, yes.
Wow. That would be pretty wild if true. But I know there are people who disagree.
Oh, yeah. There are others who point to the very distinctive Chinese aspects of the Terracotta Army, and they argue that realism didn't necessarily originate in Greece.
Right.
So it's not really a matter of saying, who did it first or anything like that.
Sure.
But it does raise interesting questions about the flow of ideas and artistic influences between different cultures.
Yeah, it definitely does. Okay, so we've talked about the emperor, the soldiers, the acrobats, but what about the people who actually built this incredible necropolis?
Right.
I mean, it's easy to get caught up in the spectacle of the army itself, but
It's important to remember that it was a massive human undertaking.
absolutely. Like in 2003, archaeologists found a mass grave with over 100 skeletons. and it's believed that these were workers who died during the construction of the necropolis. It's a pretty sobering reminder of the human cost behind these kinds of monumental projects.
It really is, and DNA analysis on some of those skeletons suggests that the workforce was actually quite diverse. Like, there were individuals from southern China, for example.
Really?
Yeah, so it seems like the Emperor's project drew people from all over the empire. It really highlights the scale and complexity of the undertaking to have thousands of people from all over coming together to build something that would last for millennia.
It really puts things into perspective. I mean, it's easy to forget that there were actual people behind all of this. People with families and lives.
Yeah, it's easy to just see them as, nameless laborers.
But they were individuals who contributed their time and skills to create something truly remarkable.
And sometimes even their lives.
Exactly. The Terracotta Army is this incredible artistic achievement.
Yeah.
But it's also a testament to the human effort and ingenuity that went into creating it.
Absolutely. It's a window into this complex society with its ambitions, its hierarchies, its incredible artistry.
Right.
And it continues to amaze us thousands of years after it was created.
That's the thing, isn't it? The Terracotta Army isn't just a bunch of statues. It's this, tangible link to the past.
Absolutely.
It is this incredible glimpse into ancient China, its beliefs, its culture.
It's a reminder that history is made up of real people.
Yeah, it's not just names and dates in a textbook.
It's amazing when you think about the level of detail, right?
Yeah.
I mean, considering the tools and techniques they had back then.
It really makes you wonder, how did they actually fire these giant figures?
Well, they had to build these enormous kilns.
Okay.
Some of them big enough to hold multiple figures at once.
Wow.
And then, of course, controlling the temperature during the firing process would have been super important.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
Too hot and the clay could crack, too cool, and it wouldn't harden properly.
So they really had to know what they were doing.
Absolutely. Especially given how many figures they were making, and
Right.
they managed to achieve a pretty consistent level of quality across the board.
Yeah, it's incredible. Thousands of these things, all made by hand.
It really speaks to their skill
Definitely.
and their dedication to the project.
For sure. Earlier, we were talking about how the necropolis was kind of like this microcosm of the emperor's world.
Right.
It wasn't just about protecting him in the afterlife, right?
No, it was much more than that.
It was also about, replicating the power and grandeur that he had during his life.
Exactly. It was a way of showcasing his achievements, even to the gods, you could say.
Yeah, I mean, the sheer scale of the project alone, right?
Exactly.
It really speaks to, his ambition
Yes.
and the resources he had at his command.
It's no wonder he's considered the first emperor of a unified China.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
He certainly left his mark on history.
He did. So, along with the figures themselves, they also found a ton of weapons.
They did.
Many of them have decayed over time, obviously, but
Right, or been looted.
the ones that remain are incredibly well preserved.
Oh, yeah.
I think I read that they uncovered something like 40,000 bronze weapons,
Something like that. Yeah,
including swords, daggers, spears, even crossbows.
that's right. And the craftsmanship is really astonishing.
I bet. I was reading about how some of the swords were even coated in chromium dioxide
Yeah.
to help prevent them from rusting.
I know, it's incredible. So they were already using some pretty sophisticated techniques back then.
Yeah, that's wild. I also thought it was interesting that the arrowheads were probably made using a system that's kind of
Oh, tell me about it.
like what we would call cellular production today. Each bundle of arrowheads has a unique chemical signature.
Yeah,
So it's almost like they have these mini factories, right,
it seems that way.
within the larger production process.
Right, each one responsible for making a specific component.
Exactly. It's just another reminder of how sophisticated
Mm.
these ancient civilizations actually were.
It really is, and it makes you wonder what other innovations they came up with that, we might not even know about.
Totally.
Lost to time.
So speaking of lost to time, we were talking earlier about that mass grave of workers found. It's definitely a somber discovery, but it's also this really valuable insight into the lives of the people who built this amazing monument.
Absolutely. It's easy to focus on the grandeur of the army itself.
Oh, yeah.
And forget about the individuals who created it.
Right. It's important to remember that these weren't just faceless laborers.
Of course not.
They were people with families and skills and dreams.
They made incredible sacrifices to create something that would last for millennia.
It's really humbling when you think about it. So out of all the unanswered questions about the Terracotta Army, what do you think is the biggest one?
Ooh, that's a tough one. There are so many mysteries still to unravel.
I know, right?
But I think one of the most intriguing questions is, what's inside the emperor's tomb?
Oh, for sure. What do you think we would find if it was ever open?
Well, historical accounts describe it as being filled with like palaces and towers and valuable artifacts,
Wow.
and even simulated rivers of mercury.
Rivers of Mercury. Wait, really?
Yeah, apparently in ancient China, mercury was thought to have these magical properties,
Interesting.
and it was used in various rituals and
So
practices.
the tomb wasn't just like a burial chamber. It was also like
Right.
a statement about their beliefs about the afterlife.
Exactly. And who knows what other secrets it holds. We could find lost texts, new technologies,
Yeah.
maybe even personal belongings that would give us a glimpse into the emperor's life.
It's really like this giant puzzle waiting to be solved.
It is, and I think the debate about whether or not to excavate it will probably continue for a long time.
Oh, definitely.
Because on the one hand, you have the potential for incredible discoveries,
Oh,
but
absolutely.
on the other hand, there's the risk of damaging or destroying these priceless artifacts.
That's true. It's a tough call.
It is, it is. But, technology's constantly advancing, right?
Yeah.
So I'm hopeful that we'll eventually be able to study the tomb without having to disturb it.
Oh, that would be amazing.
Right? Like, imagine you could create a 3D model of the entire tomb using ground-penetrating radar,
Wow.
and we could virtually explore its chambers and examine its contents in detail, but without actually causing any harm.
Yeah.
We could experience it as the ancient Chinese intended and preserve it for future generations.
It's exciting to think about what the future holds for archaeology.
It is.
I mean, the Terracotta Army is just one example
Yeah.
of the incredible things that are still out there waiting to be discovered.
And the potential for new technologies to help us learn even more about the past is huge.
It's been a really amazing journey exploring the history, the artistry, all the mysteries surrounding the Terracotta Army,
It has.
and even thinking about the ethical considerations of, how we study and preserve something like this.
Right.
It's been fascinating.
We've really delved into the details, but also tried to keep in mind the bigger picture.
Yeah.
The emperor's vision, the contributions of the workers, and the enduring legacy of this ancient wonder.
To all our listeners out there, I definitely encourage you to keep exploring this subject.
Me too.
There's so much more to learn about the Terracotta Army
Absolutely.
and the world it represents.
Can you imagine, like, for over 2,000 years, this entire army just standing there, silent, guarding the tomb.
Hidden from the world.
Hidden from the world, yeah.
Amazing.
And then just think about how they were discovered.
Oh, yeah.
Just a group of farmers digging a well.
Totally by accident.
Completely by chance. It just adds to the mystery, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It really makes you wonder what else is out there, still buried, just waiting to be found.
That's what's so exciting about archaeology.
It's true.
There's always something new to discover. And each discovery has the potential to change everything we thought we knew about the past.
Okay, so if you could travel back in time and witness the creation of the Terracotta Army firsthand,
Okay.
what would you be most eager to see?
That's a great question. I think I'd be most fascinated by the artisans.
Really?
Yeah, to see how they worked with the clay, how they sculpted the features, how they painted each figure, to see the skill and the artistry up close.
That would be amazing. To be a fly on the wall in one of those workshops.
I know, right? To see their techniques, how they collaborated, it would be an incredible glimpse into their world.
A world so different from our own.
Yeah, but at the same time,
Yeah.
it's connected to us through this shared human desire to create.
It's mind-blowing. Like, we can still connect with those ancient artisans
I know.
through their work.
Yeah, after thousands of years, it's incredible.
The Terracotta Army is so much more than just a collection of statues.
Absolutely.
It's like this, portal to the past.
A tangible link to this ancient civilization.
It's pretty powerful when you think about it.
It is. So to our listeners, I encourage you to keep learning, keep exploring. Who knows, maybe you'll make a discovery that changes our understanding of the Terracotta Army or even history itself.
That's the beauty of it, right? There's
Yeah.
always something new to learn.
And the past is full of surprises. The Terracotta Army is a perfect example of that. It was hidden for centuries, and then, boom, there it is, changing everything.
It's a good reminder to never stop questioning, never stop exploring.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, this has been a fascinating look at the Terracotta Army.
It has. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this journey. Until next time.